Today in the Founder Shop Talk, we're sitting down with Jeff Berk, co-founder and CEO of Tripkicks, the intelligence layer for corporate travel programs at Fortune 500 companies. Jeff spent 2 decades inside the corporate travel and expense world before starting Tripkicks. And what he's built is now trusted by 25 plus enterprise clients with a 4+ year average tenure. And they have done it very lean, a team of 6 and 1.1 million in ARR. Real margins, and a clear point of view on where the next decade of corporate travel is heading. Let's get into it. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the show. And before we get into Tripkicks, would love if you give us the dinner party version of who you are and how you end up in the corporate travel, not the pitch slides version.
Sounds great. Yeah, and thanks for the invite. Happy to be here and talking with you. So a little bit about myself and background. My name is Jeff Berk. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tripkicks. Before I was the co-founder and CEO of Tripkicks, I started my career as a management consultant. So I worked for IBM out of school. Didn't know what I wanted to do, so I wanted to get into consulting so I could do a lot of different things. And that's what I had the opportunity to do, which was really cool. So I spent some time at IBM, really big company, and then I moved to a small boutique firm called Consulting Group, where I actually did a lot of work in travel, expense, and procurement. So I spent a lot of my career working with Fortune 500s and helping them really advance their capabilities, their internal capabilities in those functions. So everything from process design and organizational design, a lot of technology implementations. So got to know that world really, really well in terms of what the challenges were for big companies as it related to those big areas. Got to know the vendors really well who were kind of dominating the software space. And, throughout my time at Aquis, I had the ability to lead a lot of the work that we did from a sales and delivery perspective, but also a partnership perspective. So working very closely with companies like SAP Concur and Coupa and just, supporting their adoption and advancement at large companies. So that's why I spent a lot of my time kind of growing up in that industry and got a unique perspective on corporate travel, expense, and procurement. And just, got to work with some incredible companies along the way.
Yeah, that's incredible. 20 years leading delivery for Fortune 500 travel and expense programs. What does that actually look like day to day for someone who's never worked inside that world? Like if you can share a little bit more about it.
Sure. It was kind of nice that it's a lot of similar challenges that you see across the board, right? Because if you're a big company, you need to be very efficient in those processes, right? And I started when you were still going from manual paper to systems. So it was fun to see kind of that transition and that journey around like how much efficiency could come from a company when they were looking at those processes and seeing like, how do we apply technology to them? Right. But certainly like that was a huge, huge theme, of the, late 90s, early 2000s, et cetera. So a lot of it was really focused around that. And it created a lot of opportunities at these companies to say, kind of similar to what we're seeing now with AI, right? Like, how do we apply AI to all of this? Back then it was just, hey, how do we apply the technology to something that's paper? And so it was a lot of those kind of takeaways and findings that we were able to share at a lot of these large organizations that would really redefine their processes, redefine their roles and headcount and, who needed to do what, just kind of based upon technology.
That's really interesting. Just curious also to know, like, at what point did you make the cross from an operator to a founder? There is a specific moment or a conversation or a broken workflow that it made you like, I need to build something too.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, as part of my time at Aquis, I was helping to really spearhead the partnership we had with SAP Concur, and we were their largest implementation partner. So basically working on these big global implementations for the SAP Concur platform. Some of these were like multi-year, engagements, these really, really big projects. So it was around that time where companies like Salesforce and SAP Concur, they started kind of embracing this like marketplace concept, right? Which is super common now with all these software companies where they have partners and ecosystems and, they say, okay, we're going to have the core platform, but maybe we're not going to build everything adjacent to it, right? We're going to work with specialists and we're going to, kind of bring other players into and build connections to them. So it was around that same time. And we kind of had a unique perspective in working with a lot of these companies to see, hey, there are some needs here that aren't really being addressed by some of the big players. And for various reasons, they're probably not going to be. So that was kind of the start of Tripkicks and the idea to say we can go after some more specialty services that we see as a fairly universal need, especially with the large enterprises that we believe could be embraced by these major players in the space, right? And brought in to this
Mhm.
partner ecosystem versus like trying to build a competitor to them. So that was kind of the catalyst for, for the creation of Tripkicks. And, like any founder, the journey you expect is not the journey you
Yeah.
receive, but that was the point where we decided to give it a go.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I salute you too, because corporate travel isn't exactly, to be honest, a greenfield space. There's Concur, there's a big TMCs.
Yeah.
So the legacy player, like, what did you think, or why did you think there is a room for something new, and what would say like differentiate what you're building than the big player?
It's funny. It's an industry like, yeah, I would say this to people, like it's such a big, like corporate travel is such a big industry, but from a people and from a company perspective, like it's a very small industry. Like it's dominated by these huge major players that are just these gigantic organizations. And then you have like everybody else, right? It's kind of a small number of everybody else. And something that I've found over the years and, meeting other founders, and there are organizations like Focusrite that really foster like the startup community in the business travel space. So it's a great way for people to connect. And, I'd meet these people and they're like, yeah, I'm going to go and build a company to compete with this like huge, this huge multi-billion dollar company. I'm like, that's ambitious, right? Like that's good luck, right? It's not an easy thing to do. So I
Yeah.
think from what we were looking at, like from the beginning, that was not at all what we were trying to do. Like we did not want to build something to compete with, American Express GPT or SAP Concur. We wanted to look at some of the areas that we were like, we think there's opportunity here to partner with these companies and serve their end customers on somewhat adjacent solutions that still plug into the corporate travel space that are not necessarily going to be the core focus of these major players. So from the beginning, that was always kind of our thesis of like, we're not going to try to compete with these players. In fact, we're going to have a complementary solution that's actually going to integrate with them and
Mhm.
work alongside them in a way that they would support from an introduction perspective to their clients. And that's really what we've been able to achieve as well.
And I think this is really great. And I remember when we were chatting before, you used the phrase reaching travelers at the point of decision. And I love this phrase, and I think stuck with me. Like, if you can maybe unpack that for me a little bit more, what does the existing tool miss? What does the phrase means to you?
Yeah, sure. So just to maybe back up for a minute, a little bit about like what we do at Tripkicks. We're essentially like big picture, we're a communication platform, right? We're a communication platform that large companies use to better communicate with their travelers. And the reason they want to better communicate with their travelers is a couple different reasons. One is they want to influence the traveler behavior. They want people to be compliant with the program and aware of all the resources, but they also want to make sure that travelers have access to the information that they need to be successful. So that's our world, are really those kind of two big components, influencing behavior and access to information. And that's kind of where we fit in the world of the travel ecosystem. And so that's why we're not trying to say, oh, we're not trying to be a booking tool. We're not trying to be a travel agency. We're more of like a B2B SaaS application that supports the corporate travel kind of program at a large company. So for the point of sale for us, that's kind of been that was our first initial focus. It's a huge influential point for a traveler, right? The point that they're actually making these decisions. And there are a couple of points throughout the process, but the point of sale, that was our initial focus because it's such an important one. It's where you're determining like, okay, I'm going to go on a business trip. Now, what am I, where am I going to stay? Right? Like, what are the suppliers that I'm going to use? When am I going to travel? Like, what are the specific times and dates? So there's so many decisions that are being made at that point in time. And it's such an influential touch point that if a company, like, if you think about it, a lot of these big companies, there's like one travel manager, right? Or maybe there's a small team and there are, tens of thousands of employees. So the ability for a travel manager to say like, oh, and this is what you should do. Here are some recommendations. Like that's nearly impossible, right?
Yeah.
So the concept of having technology that can do more of that, and can go a really long way in the impact that it can have to shape the decisions that a traveler makes. So that's why we look at, what are the points in time throughout the trip journey, and what are the different needs that a traveler has during those points in time? What's the information they need? What decisions are they making? And how do we focus on connecting those dots and getting them the information they need to make the best decision? Right. So we're kind of
Yeah.
connecting the corporate perspective and all their resources and information with what does the traveler actually need.
Mm.
And, where we started was really mostly around point of sale integration into online booking tools to support that touch point. And what we've been working on recently, which has been really exciting, is the expansion of that concept, but throughout the entire trip journey. So what that means for us is it opens up the world of information that a traveler might need, because when you're making a decision about travel, you need information about, the suppliers and to better be able to select them and things like that. But then when you're about to travel, you need different things, right? You need to know, all right, where am I going? How am I going to get from point A to B, right? If I'm going to the company office, where is it? Have I been there before? Right? Like, your information needs totally changed. So it opened up our world in terms of like the types of information that we could provide to the traveler, but it also really compelled us to build integrations into other tools outside of the online booking tool. Because yeah, you're booking your travel in the online booking tool. But once you book your travel, you're
Mm.
probably not going back to the online booking tool for a while, right? Now you're traveling, you're on your mobile, you're on Slack, you're on Teams, right? You're looking at your email. So it really compelled us to build these other integration points and communication channels to be able to reach travelers wherever they were, or whatever
Mhm.
channels they were working in.
And I found that really interesting and also very impressive what you're built with a very small team when it gets to integration and flow. It would be beneficial maybe to walk us through what happened when an employee, for example, in a Fortune 500 opens up to book a trip. What changes when trip text in the flow and how things work and the flow?
Sure. Yeah. So we used to get this because we are a small team and we do work with very, very large companies. So sometimes we get people that are saying, wait, company X is using you guys. How many people at company X? And we're like, everybody. And they're like, well, how is that possible? We're like, well, because we're integrated into their process flow,
Ecosystem,
right?
yeah.
So whether a traveler, like, we've always taken the perspective of, because we're a B2B tool, like, we don't really care if a traveler knows who we are or that we exist, right? We want to be helpful to them and provide information, but we also want to be pretty seamless and tightly integrated into their experience. So that's kind of, we're not trying to market ourselves to our users or anything. We're trying to, our customer is really the corporation and the travel manager. So from the traveler's perspective, they're going to go and they're going to start their journey, their journey to go and book a trip, however that is, right? They launch their internal portal, they go into the online booking tool, and right away, they're going to be seeing information from Tripkicks. And, again, like, focused on access to company resources, like even something like the travel policy, right? Like, if you're a normal employee at a company, like, how often, like, you're probably not looking at the travel policy very often, right? Like,
Mm.
that's not what you're doing. You're focused on your job, right? You're not traveling every day. And even if you are traveling every day, you're probably not looking at the travel policy every day. So the reality is, like, you probably don't know where that document is. It might be very hard for you to find that. And there are so many other resources like that within a corporate travel program that the same thing could be said for. Like, at the clients we work with, they have access to these like amazing perks and benefits at all these suppliers. And, like, that's an amazing benefit and resource to travelers, but, like, travelers don't know about it, right? Because it's hard to communicate with them because these things exist in one place and travelers don't necessarily know that, right? Of course, the travel program managers are trying to make it easy, but it's just really hard with existing corporate tools. So that's an area that we've really focused on with our clients, is just saying, hey, this is going to be here and it's going to be front and center, and the traveler can engage with it if they want to, but they no longer have to remember where to find it, because they're going to go onto their online booking tool and it's literally going to be right there. And we're able to take this information and organize it in a way that's very, like, engaging and also very tasteful for a traveler. So it's not overwhelming, but they kind of know that, oh, if I go there, that's kind of where I'm going to see everything that I need. And that's what we've tried to become. So it's not about like, oh, here's Tripkicks, go into the Tripkicks application. It's about, oh yeah, now I can easily access this information. And travelers might not even know why, but we're the reason that they can easily access that information.
That's totally makes sense. And I think it's impressive, as I mentioned, about the integration, like how much you can share about that. I know you're integrated with SAP Concur and most of the major TMCs. How did you earn this integration with such a small team?
Yeah. So it definitely, in this industry, it helps to know people. As I mentioned, it's a small industry. So some of these companies can be a little daunting to work with. So certainly the relationships that I had before starting Tripkicks were very helpful. Some of our initial team members had also brought with them relationships. It's probably the same in any industry, right? Like you're calling someone cold, like it's really hard to get through to that. If you're leaning on relationships that you've developed and had for many years, it's a lot easier to get the right audience. And I mean, I wish I had other words of wisdom, but like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's kind of how it is. And that's why I think, a lot of founders aren't necessarily new to their industry, right?
Yeah.
And I kind
That's
of know
important.
it and know the major players and have the connections. So a lot of times it's not necessarily like the technical integration work that's the long pole in the tent. It's the
Mhm.
idea of like, okay, well, now we have to get to the point where we can, commercially speaking or whatever, we're ready to work with this company. And, for companies like that, for them to dedicate resources to work with a startup is no small thing. So
Yeah.
fortunately for us that we were able to get through some of those hoops. And then it was just a matter of kind of the technical components, which are, again, like they're complicated, but they're usually not the most complicated thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also in your product, like as a former technical person myself and product strategy person, behavioral science, I believe, is a thread running through your product. Preferred hotel nudges, advanced booking windows, cabin glass guidance. So where did that lens came from? And if you can also share a little bit more about it and
Sure.
the behavioral science in your product in general.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was one of the newer additions for us. And just to put things into perspective a little bit, so we just launched a new product called Tripkicks Catalyst that includes a lot of that and more. And that's kind of the expansion that I was mentioning around other touch points for the traveler throughout the trip. So there's a lot that's wrapped up into Tripkicks Catalyst. What's cool about that is it really represents a lot of what we have learned in working with our clients over the past couple years.
Mhm.
So, it's like every startup's dream is like, okay, you build something, you get some feedback from clients, and then you do that, right? You
Yeah.
keep listening to them. So I kind of think like that's what Catalyst is for us, right? In working with a lot of these amazing large companies, we've learned a lot about their program. We've tested some ideas, we've seen some things that work really well, and we've seen some things that don't work really well, right? Like that's what it is. It's experimentation. So
Mhm.
we've been able to take a lot of those learnings and apply that to a product that is still configurable because it's important to be configurable, but it also brings in a lot of best practices. So one of the things that we've been working on, going back to the behavioral science piece, is over the past couple of months, we've been bringing more behavioral science into our platform. And what's been, the way we've been doing that, and as a small team, you're limited in where you could spend resources and time. Us and everybody else, right, has been looking for ways to apply generative AI. And this has been one of the great ones for us because we don't employ behavioral scientists.
Mhm.
Like that would be great,
Yeah.
but like we don't have behavioral scientists on staff. And what we've found is like, okay, well, maybe that's okay, right? Because behavioral scientists exist and there have been a ton of studies done. And there have been a lot of studies done on behavioral science in enterprise systems and even, outside of enterprise systems, things that can relate to what we do in enterprise systems. So we've actually spent time basically bringing those studies into corporate travel. Because while we're not
Mhm.
experts on behavioral science, we are experts on corporate travel. And we know how we can take proven science and facts, right? And interpret that and bring it into travel. So what that's meant for us is, we've looked at everything from content and the way something is worded to the psychology behind the type of message, right?
Mhm.
To what type of data is being presented in the message. Like, are we saying, hey, this is your behavior, right? And this is your peer's behavior, right? And how does that make a person feel? Well, it's documented how that makes a person feel and in what situation. So we've kind of
Mhm.
brought all that context in, in addition to, you're a former product person. So like, how does somebody read information? Well, they read in the, the Z or the L, and like all of those findings, we've been able to really bring into the system so that we truly have best practices, and we're kind of past this. Well, let's try this, let's try that. Or client X wants it to look that way. Well, why? Well, we don't know. But now it's like, well, no, it should be this way because this is the way that, then here are the reasons why it should be this way. Right. So that's a lot of what we've been working on over the past couple of months, is really bringing that, looking to see all of the different areas that we could incorporate behavioral science into the product to be able to just maximize the overall impact that we're going to have.
Yeah. And I think this is great because having that balance between what the clients want, what the users want, and what we want to push for the next frontier, always hard to have. And what you've been doing, I think it's great for that. I want to unpack a little bit, or if you allow me, humble brag for your early traction a little bit. So 72% gross margin, a few months from profitability. Was that always your plan, or did it emerge from the way you decided to run the company, or how and why that did happen? And what's your
Yeah.
reaction?
Certainly, like for the past, I'd say 2 years, a focus on margin and cash flow has been, from a financial perspective, definitely at the forefront.
Hmm.
Because we're, we started up before COVID, right? So like we've been through some hard times. We didn't, as a travel company, that saw things through that. And so we never quite had the luxury of this like traditional idealistic startup of like, oh, okay, let's go sign a customer or two, get some traction, raise a big round, hire a big team. Like that was not in the cards for us. Right. So we kind of got used to this idea of we just need to have, our team needs to be really, really strong. Right. And we need to be able to wear multiple hats, and we need to be able to, our small team, we need to be able to do the same thing as a team who's much larger than us. And, fortunately, kept the team together for the most part through that time. So I think it's just at this point kind of instilled in everyone's DNA that like, yeah, like I have to, whoever it is, like I have to do the work of 10 people, you
Mm.
know? So this whole idea of like, yeah, let's see how we can make it work with our team and not have to grow and scale and and spend a lot of money, right? Expanding and hiring and all of that. That's just kind of been a little bit of our natural evolutions. Focusing on margins really made sense for us in terms of our growth and our success. And certainly, in the past year, with the ability to apply AI internally, that's been a game changer again for us and a lot of other companies out there, right? This idea that, okay, well, we thought we would need a couple more FTEs to do this. We're now finding, you know what, we can probably build some tools for the people internally to be able to do that, and not have to necessarily, go with the plan that we were thinking about a while ago. So that certainly helped, further that concept and idea of, hey, we think we can really win on margins here.
Absolutely. As we also invest and support AI companies and enterprise. So that was actually my next question about the AI part.
Yeah,
Because everyone now they say we added AI, but how this was different for you. And I like the example you mentioned about internally, but in the product itself, if you can share how for the past 18 months, adding AI to the product really unlocked things for you in the product.
sure. Yeah, I mean, when I think about AI, it's really those two things are very different for us, right? It's like, how do we use AI internally and how do we use AI in the product? Because internally we have to, we're looking at our own operations, but we're also not looking at production data, right? Like we're not necessarily looking at like our clients' production data. So there's always a lens of like, oh, this is the world that impacts client data, right? And this is the world that doesn't impact client data. And those are two very different worlds. So from the product perspective, it was really funny because as part of Catalyst, we are introducing our first AI component into the product. So definitely not something we were, I wish I could say we were super early and did it 18 months ago. Like, no way. We were definitely not, we were not early bringing AI into the product. We're just doing that now. And a lot of that's honestly like just by design with the companies that are working with, more Fortune 500s, AI has changed a lot in the past couple months for them, but I mean, it was a bad word a year ago. It was the type of like, they're still apprehensive and cautious about it, but like they didn't want to hear it. Right. So we were thinking about it, but we were very much not saying, hey, we're bringing it in, it's coming into the tool. I think we've all seen that appetite change very quickly as more people were using it just in their daily lives. And we're like, oh my God, I can't believe all the things that this is now making possible that weren't before. And now that's kind of trickling in, or has been trickling into the corporate space a lot more for these, Fortune 500s. But we were very careful in how we built it so that it was going to be an optional component to our product. Because even now we still have clients who say, hey, we love the idea, but like realistically, it's going to take 2 years for us to get anything approved from an AI standpoint, just because they're in regulated industries. And that's unfortunately just how it is. So we knew it was never going to be something we'd say, okay, now it's live in the product for everyone, because that's just not how things fly in the, in B2B enterprise SaaS. So what we did in the product is, I kind of talked about earlier how we focus on supporting travelers throughout the entire journey and making sure they have the information they need. So the logical starting point for us from an AI perspective was just the conversational piece, right? Deploying an AI agent that could, instead of just always pushing information to the traveler, now the traveler can say, hey, I need this, right? And we were able to provide it to them through these other channels as well. So for companies, a lot of, we kind of already have this information from them about all their programs and policies and everything. So now it just unlocks this like very natural communication channel that a traveler would say, well, I need this, like, give it to me, right? And now there's one place for them to ask for that. So that's how we've deployed AI in the product, and internally, we're finding new opportunities for it every day, like a lot of companies.
Yeah, and it sounded also like it's the trial and error always happening, learning from it. Just curious, what's the biggest thing if you remember, got wrong early on when you started your company, and how that changed the way you operated or changed your ways later?
I think, in things that I wish I had stronger convictions on back then, I would say, I'm one of those, I'm a person who's like always assumes that everyone else is smarter than me. I'm like, oh yeah, like everyone's way smarter than me. So I'm genuinely like very curious. I love advice, right? I'm not one of those people who's like, no, like my way is the right way. Like, please tell me what you think. Give me advice, right? Like, help me
Yeah,
learn. So I've always kind of approached things that way. So, the first thing I did, was surround myself with amazing advisors, right? And I still have like fantastic advisors that help support the company. And, like anyone, go to them. Here's my problem. Like, here's my challenge. Help me solve it. And something, back then I was like, oh, that's what this person said. That's what I should do. Right. Or that's what this person said. I should do that. This is really important. I need to focus on that. And I think it's very easy to do that because that's easy, right? You're like, this
Mhm.
person's experience, like, let me just do what they say. And that'll be right. And I think what I learned is like, no one else is in your seat. You're the only person who has all of this perspective. So, the job of an advisor, and your job as a founder and CEO is not to take the advice of somebody else. You have to be that filter. You have to understand why they're saying that, but you also have to be the arbiter to say, does that make sense for me? Right. And it took me a while to learn that. And it was easy to say, oh, this is what I should be doing because that's what this person said I should be doing. And to understand, like, actually, no, I have a more informed opinion about what this is. And I'm glad I'm getting all these perspectives because that's super helpful and beneficial. It broadens my world to things that I wouldn't have thought about, but it's not always the right answer. And I think for that to me was like, okay, like I have a gut, right? And I should listen to it sometimes. So.
I think that's a great advice. And speaking of the advice as well, like I wonder for a founder watching this who's thinking about building inside a mature, slow moving enterprise vertical. We always love and hate enterprise at the same time. So what's the one thing that you personally wish someone had have told you before you started building Tripkicks?
Building inside a big enterprise. I mean, advice that I give people, and I kind of came from this world, so I don't know that this was so much of a surprise to me, but I think it continues to be a surprise for many people. I think you said this, is just how slow things move. I mean, honestly, like it's easy to come from like a startup world where like you're moving so fast and you have the ability and luxury to change course on things easily and say, we're going to do this. Actually, no, for these reasons, we're not going to do it. We're going to do this instead, right? It's easy for a startup to do. That is not how big companies operate. So just the ability for them to make a decision and get something done can be just like excruciating at times. And, we know that and we've been living in that world, but it doesn't necessarily make it any easier. So when you're the little guy who's trying to partner and work with the big guys, I mean, we see the same thing from our clients, some of them, right? Where, I mean, just for them to onboard a new supplier, I mean, it could be years. It's crazy to say that, but like, honestly, it's the truth with a lot of things. So that's definitely been a challenge in, the industry, not even the industry, but in just the B2B world.
Totally. Jeff, this has been really a great conversation and a pleasure to have you today. And just before we wrap up, where people can find Tripkicks and who should be reaching out to you right now that we would love for them to reach.
Sure. A couple different people that we want to find Tripkicks. One is, our travel manager community, and we're always trying to help them. We'll be at some of the major events in the travel industry, Global Business Travel Show, and also Business Travel Show America. You can find Tripkicks at the major travel industry events for sure. But also we're just kicking off a funding round now, so anyone is interested in learning a little bit more about that, happy to speak with them.
Awesome. Thank you again. It was a pleasure. And thank you for everyone who's watching. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.